Hello, my friends. Yesterday I watched a film. I know, amazing, me watching a film. But I watched a film called Project Hail Mary, starring Ryan Gosling and James Ortiz. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of a review of the film. But before I do, it is a recent film. It's still in the theaters in some places, and I'm going to spoil it. So, warning, spoilers. If you don't want to watch the rest of the review, that's fine. I get that, I think. Um, yeah, so my immediate thoughts about the film are that it's good, but not great. And I think that there is a few things that are preventing it from being great. The basic plot of the film is Ryan Gosling stars as a character named Rylan Grace, and he's a high school biology teacher, but he had some academic background before as a biologist, as an exobiologist, but he lost his position after he assaulted someone. And when we see him in the beginning of the movie, he feels, well, the movie switches from the time on Earth to the time on the ship. So when we see him on the time of, during the time on Earth, in the beginning of the actual linear progression of the plot, he is kind of like washed up. So that's him. And he had a theory that there would be out there somewhere in the universe life that wasn't based on water. And that's going to be important in a moment. So what happens is the world discovers there's something called the Propofa line, or basically there's a infrared line running from the sun to Venus, and nobody knows what it is. So they send a probe to look at this line, and they see like there's all these little dots. So they take a sample and they come back to Earth, where there's a big project to kind of understand what's going on with the sun, because the sun is also dimming, and if this continues in 30 years, it will cause an ice age on Earth, and a lot of people will die. So they come back to Earth with these samples, and as I said, Grace has been selected to be involved because they think maybe this isn't a water-based life form because it exists in space. But and this scene is really, really well done. He examines the life forms, which he names astrophages, and there actually are water-based life forms that can travel through space for some reason. So they discover that it's a life form, and they discover that all of the stars around Earth star, around the sun, I mean, they're not around the sun, but in the neighborhood of the sun, are also having the same problem, except for Tau Ceti. So they're wondering, like, what's going on in Tau Ceti that it's not being attacked by these astrophages. And the astrophages aren't actually attacking, they're just little creatures, right? They're doing what they do. So they go from sun to sun and they kind of absorb the energy of the sun, of different stars, and then they can like kind of explode it. And that's another thing, that these astrophages, they can be used as a fuel source because they contain all of this energy inside them. So they decide to send a mission to Tau Ceti to figure out what's going on, and if they figure out what's going on, to send whatever the solution is back to Earth. But they only have enough astrophage to fuel because they're using this astrophage as a fuel to go one direction. And the leader of the project says the problem's not the spaceship, the problem is actually the fuel. So they figure out that they can use these astrophages as fuel. I don't think it says in the movie, but in the book, the trip takes about 4 years. So it's really, really long distance, but they do have 30 years, so that leaves 26 years left to figure out this problem before the Ice Age starts. So, here's where it gets a little bit more interesting because Grace has been training these scientists to go on this mission, but there's an industrial accident involving astrophages, and the scientists that were supposed to go on the mission were killed. And they only have like a 2 week window to send somebody on this mission. And Grace gets asked to volunteer, but he doesn't actually get volunteered because they kind of Shanghai him and they put him on the ship anyway. But he doesn't want to go, so they drug him and they put him on the ship. They give him amnesia so he doesn't wake up and jeopardize the mission. So then, and as I said, the story goes forward, goes backwards, but like in a chronological way, what happens now is that the Hail Mary vessel arrives at Tau Ceti, and Grace wakes up, and he's very, very confused because he still has this amnesia drug in his system, and he's trying to figure out where he is, and slowly he understands, he remembers about the mission and why he's there. And as he's like remembering this and trying to figure out like how he's gonna solve this problem, another vessel kind of pulls up next to him, and they have kind of like this moment where um, the other vessel sort of adjusts the gravity so Grace will have proper gravity, and they make this makeshift tunnel, and Grace and the alien creature in that vessel start to communicate. And I think that the alien is really well designed. It's like a spider rock kind of creature, and it looks like a spider, but also not like a spider, if you know what I mean. It looks like an alien. And the way that they show how this creature views the world, it has sort of like a sonic way of looking at the world, makes a lot of sense, and it's really well designed. Anyway, they get to the point where they can communicate basically, and they learn different words, and Grace figures out a program where Rocky, that's the alien's name. I mean, the alien has a name, but it's really difficult for humans to say. So that's the alien's name, Rocky. Rocky is able to communicate with Grace and vice versa, and they figure out how they are actually going to, um, how they're actually going to solve this problem of the astrophages, because Rocky also comes from a star, I think it's called Arid or Enid or something like that. He comes from a star, or it, not really he, it comes from a star where they're dealing with the same problems. And the good thing about the story is that the aliens are pretty advanced. Like they have space travel, they can travel in space, so they understand a lot about science, but they don't really understand relativity and radiation. So, I mean, that's not a good thing for them, but it's interesting in the story. And I'm gonna make it brighter. Hold on. Yeah, so that's interesting in the story how they are able to, show an alien as being an actual alien. Like an alien wouldn't know everything that humans know, and vice versa. So Rocky's species is able to make some gases into solids, and they use that as a kind of metal. Like xenon, I think, is in the story. They make a form of xenonite, which is like a solid form of xenon gas. So really, really interesting. Anyway, they come up with a plan to see what, like, to get some samples from the atmosphere of the planet that's orbiting Tau Ceti, and they call it, I think, Adrian, because they're watching the Rocky movie, and uh, Rocky wants to name the planet something, so he names it like some really, and the translation is really good too, because it's something like really literal, but it's probably not that literal in his language, but Grace can only understand these very literal things like Rocky Planet from the sun, or from Tau Ceti or something. So he encourages Rocky to name it Adrian, because Adrian is the name that they gave to Rocky's, the English name or Earth name that they gave to Rocky's mate. So it basically is named after Rocky's mate. So it really, really nice moment there. And anyway, they get the sample from the atmosphere of this planet, and they discover that the reason that the astrophages are not taking over Tau Ceti, the sun, is that there's some kind of amoeba-like predator that's hunting them. And again, it's really well done, because these astrophages are not, they're existential threats, but they're not an existential threat that has any sort of intention. They're just animals doing what they would do in an environment. And in this particular environment, there are animals that can hunt those animals. So kind of like when you take one animal that is the predator of another animal, and you're trying to control it in an environment. And that has a lot of problems, right? Generally on Earth, but uh, it's either the sun or maybe cause some problems in Venus's ecosystem. Yeah, because what they're going to do is they're going to genetically engineer these Taumiba, they call them, for it's not said in the movie, but in the book, they say that they're going to engineer them for Venus, and they're going to engineer them for the planet next to Rocky's sun. Because basically, what happens is these astrophages need the energy from the sun to breed, and they need some carbon dioxide from the sun to breathe, or from a star, or from a planet near the star to breathe. So in our case, it's Venus, but Rocky's solar system has the same thing. So anyway, they do that, and they're like, yeah, there was some problems where the fuel tanks for the Hail Mary got damaged because the astrophages started to leak. Rocky fixes this because, as I said, they have a great mechanical ability. So Rocky fixes it, and the Hail Mary and Rocky ship are on their way. So then Grace discovers something really troubling, that the Tau amoeba that they have bred, that they have genetically engineered to survive on the different planets, can also eat through xenonite, the solid that I mentioned earlier. And Grace is able to contain it on the human ship because the human ship is not made entirely of xenonite, but Rocky's ship is. So Grace realizes that he has a choice. He can go back to Earth and make sure everything is okay with on Earth, or because they have limited amounts of this astrophage fuel, or he can go and try and rescue Rocky. So he goes and tries to rescue Rocky, and the like in the parameters of the mission, they were never coming back, right? It was a suicide mission. So he does have this way of sending the samples back to Earth. So he does that, and he goes after Rocky, and he saves Rocky. And then the movie ends when he's on the planet, and they've made sort of like an environment for him with water, and like it's like a beach, and he actually has a job teaching young members of Rocky's society, earth science, because as I said, there are some gaps in their knowledge, and he's a scientist, so he can kind of fill in those gaps. So that's the basic plot of the film. And I think, I mean, that's that's the plot. It's not the basic plot. That is the plot of the film. And I think it's good but not great. Maybe I'll tell you why it's good first. It's really good because the moments between Rocky and Grace are really, really sweet and really, really funny. And it's like it's a bro film basically. Like Grace and Rocky are bros, even though I don't think Rocky's species has any gender. I don't know. We don't know that. It's never expressed. But they're friends, right? And they would die for each other because so Rocky's species is very communal, and he's been very lonely these 45 years next to Tau Ceti. So when Grace comes, he's like, oh, finally, I have a friend. And so, I mean, I don't even know if they have a concept of friendship, but he immediately treats Grace as a member of his, like, sort of tribe, which is really, really good. And I like the fact that Grace sacrifices his chance to go back to Earth for Rocky because I think that Rocky has been one of the most important relationships in his life. So, of course, he would sacrifice that chance for Rocky. And there's also a scene where, in this very chaotic moment where they're trying to get the sample and the fuel tank blows up on the Hail Mary. So, um, Grace is really trying to save them both. He gets knocked out. Like he is able to like do one thing, but the pressure is too much and he gets knocked out. And Rocky has this sort of like ball kind of thing that he constructed because the atmosphere is different, right? It's a nitrogen based atmosphere, I guess. So it would kill Grace, and an oxygen based atmosphere would kill uh, Rocky. So anyway, Rocky sees that Grace is in this like really difficult position, so he forces himself out of, or itself out of the ball. He rescues Grace, brings him to the medical bay, and then goes back to his ship. And basically, and the crazy thing about that is, I mean, we don't know why Rocky did it. Like, it's really easy to put sort of human standards on this alien, but there are some human like attributes to this alien. And he sacrifices not only himself, but potentially his entire world and civilization to save Grace. You know. Um, and I don't think that he was really thinking it through because he didn't have a lot of time. But obviously, if Grace doesn't survive, then he's probably not going to figure out how to save his world. So it's also kind of like a selfish thing. So the movie is good because of that. There's really funny moments because of Grace's understanding of the English language, Rocky's understanding of the English language. So really, really good movie. Why is it not a great movie? And maybe this is something really personal to me, but I think it's not a great movie because of the themes of the movie. So the theme of the movie is basically heroism and what you require to become a hero. So that's the emotional core of the film, and I understand why it's there. And maybe the movie wouldn't work as well if it wasn't there. But there are all of these things that happen which don't make any sense in reality. So Grace is sent on this mission, and he didn't want to go on the mission. So we have this idea that you can't do anything heroic if it's not your choice. So to make it not his choice, and this is probably a problem in the book too, they give him amnesia. So he basically has another chance to do the right thing, and he does the right thing. He does the heroic thing because he gets another chance. But for me, I don't think that matters so much. I think the whole point of heroism is that you don't know who's going to be heroic. And a person might not be heroic in one situation, but they might be heroic in another situation. And the leader of the project also says something like, I need to know that you'll like fight for what you believe in. And, even though people say you're wrong, you'll like believe that you're right. And Grace says something, yeah, sure, why not? And she's like, do you want this? And he's like, quite reasonably, I think, yeah, I want to be a part of this project if you want me to be a part of the project. Like, because there's this sort of like moral judgment that's put on that you have to be like so committed to something. Whereas if you're just a professional, if you're just competent, that's good enough sometimes. You don't need to have all of this morality and motivation behind it. So, as I said, I can understand why removing that might make the film less emotionally resonant, but I don't think so, because I think the whole point of the movie for me is not the hero's journey, but actually the journey between Rocky and Grace. Like the bromance between them, I think is the whole point of it. And I think the last other big thing, maybe not big, it's not a big thing, and I completely understand why they did it this way, but it does kind of annoy me. So there's this moment where they're saying goodbye, and it's a callback to another moment where uh, Grace is about to go on this really, really dangerous mission. And Rocky says, words of encouragement, words of encouragement. And Grace says, you just can't say words of encouragement. And then Rocky says, great words of encouragement, great words of encouragement. So it's a callback to this moment that I'm going to talk about, where they're about to part before they know that Grace will come back and rescue Rocky. No one knows that, but they're about to part. They think it's forever. And Rocky says, you're a hero, Grace. You're heroic. And that's kind of connected to this hero's journey thing that I mentioned before. But I really don't like that. I don't mind that Rocky said that, but Grace in this moment should say it too. Because Rocky also was heroic, right? Rocky risked his life going to a place for 45 years, and he had a glimmer of hope of success. So the Rocky species did exactly what humans did, right? So if what the humans did was heroic, what the Rocky aliens did was heroic as well. Maybe there's that thing that the Rocky aliens were not going to sacrifice themselves suicidally and the humans were, so maybe it's more heroic, but the dangers are the same inherent in the mission. And I think the whole movie, as I said, is this bromance between Grace and Rocky. So I think it makes sense that that Grace would grow as a person, so he would see the heroism that Rocky did as well, right? It wouldn't be just one-sided. And I think it makes sense again that the film is this way, but it's very from the perspective of Grace, and I think it's okay that it's from the perspective of Grace, but there should be these moments where you can see the perspective of Rocky, or at least you can see that Grace sees the perspective of Rocky, because that's one of the foundations of a relationship, of a great friendship, right? Is understanding where the other person is coming from, or other alien in this case. So then, yeah, and there's another small thing where they do this, and I know that they're doing it for filmmaking reasons, and that is this sort of device they have where Rocky can say something and Grace will understand it, and vice versa. So we hear Grace speak in English, and we hear Rocky's voice be translated. but we actually don't hear Rocky's voice when he's talking through this device. And they do that for a practical reason. So it would be really weird just hearing his language all the time. But for me, it would be like a very crucial detail because then you're always aware that Rocky has his own perspective and you're not lost in Grace's perspective. And the movie later actually sort of remedies this a little bit, where there's a scene where Rocky is in his little like ball thing that he made, but a more sophisticated, and he's having a conversation with Grace, and Grace is speaking English, and Rocky is speaking his own language, and they understand each other perfectly, but there's subtitles. So it's clear, like, to understand a language you need a lot of effort on your part. So Grace has tried to make this effort to understand. Oh yeah, and then when the last scene, he's giving a lecture to these alien children, I assume, or alien individuals from Rocky's species, and he's giving them a lecture about earth science, and he's speaking English, and you don't hear their language, right? So that is such a small detail, and you might think, why is it important? I think it's important because it would reinforce the message of the movie, which is it's about this friendship, about how these two aliens started to know and love each other actually on a deep level, not a romantic level, but a deep friendship, you know? So yeah, I think if you did those little things, it would be better. You could even keep the whole hero's journey, because I'm not sure how you'd get rid of that and still make the movie have some sort of emotional resonance. Because the hero's journey, like him becoming a hero, is also him becoming a good friend, right? So it's kind of connected. So a good movie, not a great movie. But what do you think? Have you seen Project Hail Mary? Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like what I do, please subscribe. I'm trying to become the most prolific reviewer of all time. I need to have about 15,000 reviews, so this is one of them. And if you like what I do and you subscribe to the channel and you leave comments, even if you tell me like I'm wrong, and people do that a lot. Even if you criticize my pronunciation, people do that a lot as well. So it's fine. It actually shows YouTube and other people that this is something that they might like. They might be interested in watching. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.